Hello students, Dr. Turner here, and I wanted to make a video to show you what goes through my mind as I grade your Sunday night syntheses. That way you can see what I'm looking for and there's like nothing up my sleeve, and you'll also understand what a synthesis is so that if you want to give an assignment like this to your own students, you can, and you can really articulate what you want. So here goes. How to crush your Sunday night synthesis, brought to you by Dr. Turner. So when you synthesize, you're actually combining information to create something new. And it's actually much more cognitively difficult than just reading something and summarizing it. Now notice in a module, I'll often give you several different materials, like you'll have a video, you'll have a textbook chapter, you may have like a TED Talk or a podcast. And so what I'm asking you to do when I ask you to synthesize is to look at all of those things and say, well, what is a theme I can identify? What is something that seems important in all of these things? And how can I put them together in a way that helps inform the kind of teacher and person I want to be? Now notice that's a lot harder than just taking all of those things and saying, oh, well, you know, in the chapter, the author said this, and in the podcast, the presenter said blah, or whatever, right? Or Dr. Turner said in her video, and just sort of itemizing what happened in each of those things. Now that's summary, and summary is something we do a lot in schools, but it's overdone, and you're in upper division education, and so I'm going to ask you to do something more difficult, which is to ask how information works together. Now, if you're in my other class, you might notice that I conceptualize blooms as sort of superficial thinking on the top of the tree, and then more difficult under the subterranean thought processes as sort of the roots of the tree. But that aside, in case you're not in my other class. Bloom's taxonomy used to look like this. We have old versions and newer versions. This is the old version. And synthesis used to be this thing that was sort of up there at the higher levels of thinking. Notice that this one conceptualizes thinking as sort of lower thought processes in higher order thinking. And synthesis used to be up here as this sort of hard thing to do cognitively, but not as hard as evaluation. But I like the new version of Bloom's better, in which synthesis actually ends up being here under creating, because you're not just taking information and regurgitating it. You're like saying, okay, if I have these pieces, what do they mean? How do they work together? It's like, say you're a composer, you get the same notes as everybody else, but you put them together differently to create something new. In the same way, you do that for my class. You get the same information as everybody else, but you get to put it together in ways that are meaningful to you. And hopefully those are different than, your ideas are different than the person next to you. That's what makes them fun to grade for me. Because some person in the class may say, you know, I looked at all these materials and what really jumps out at me is the importance of story. And another student might say, you know, I looked at all these materials and what really jumps out at me is the importance of reflective practice. So what's great about this is there's no hidden thing up my sleeve in terms of what that theme is that you identify. It's that you do identify something that you're noticing among those sources, that you're not just saying, well, here's 1, 2, and 3, right? So let me show you an example of a synthesis that is not a synthesis. This is a non-example. And you'll notice, if you've been in my Seed 450, that these are texts you've probably seen. Now, the students were asked to take these different texts and synthesize them. What are the themes? This student writes, in the Tovani chapter, a reading teacher goes into different classrooms. She started in the biology classroom. I think this is a good idea to have a teacher come in and model to the other teachers, and also to get the students how to effectively read textbooks. She taught them how to get through the boring textbook and how to study for the test. She showed them different strategies and ideas. As a teacher, I would like to use some of those strategies. In the Strong chapter, it explains different forms of expressive writing. The examples it gives are very useful for different content areas. Also, the expressive writing stories in the beginning are very well put together and are useful examples for students. Now, in addition to, in my teacher brain, my writer brain, reading this, I like the first thing that slams me between the eyes is like the sheer vagueness of this. Like, there were very many good strategies that day. Like, what were they and how were they useful to you? Now, notice I'm not just doing this to clobber you. It's because the more specific you can be about how something applies to you, the more likely you are to use it. So it's about, hopefully, your practice as a teacher. If you have vague ideas, they never translate into actual practice. And so if you look at the syllabus that we have, not the syllabus, but the rubric that we have for this, I almost want to, well, the references are vague. They're there, but I don't know. It's so vague. I can't tell if this person even understands the chapters themselves, let alone how to apply. And notice neither one of those. Notice those two things are separated, very separated summaries and vague at that. So this one explodes my mind before I even start reading it, because there's no differentiation of ideas based on paragraphs. And if you read this, you may notice that it's pretty scattered. Like, it's pretty hard to follow. Like, I can't find a common thread between those texts, even though I can tell this person read because there's some quotes sprinkled in, right? This one's a synthesis, and it helps me know it's a synthesis right from the first sentence, where it says, a common theme I noticed between Strong and Tovani was the concept of reflection and its uses in teaching reading and writing. Okay, now I will let you read the rest of it. I won't read to you. You're capable of pausing a video and looking at this. But that first sentence to me signals that this person is not just cherry picking a couple of quotes to throw into a paragraph to pass off an assignment, but they're really trying to see, number one, what are the commonalities, and number two, how do those specifically inform teaching? Like, what does that look like in practice in the classroom? So this is harder than summarizing. We'll go back to this. This is ever so much harder than just remembering a few details and throwing them in. It's harder than summarizing or saying, here's what Strong said in chapter 2. It's even more than applying it to your teaching. It's actually putting all that together in ways that help you think about how do you want to teach and how teaching and learning works. So, anyway, if you have questions about that, if you're struggling with that, if you would like more feedback on a synthesis, no matter what your score, always feel free to contact me. The point of this class is really to make you more powerful learners, because when you're more powerfully learning, when you understand how that happens, when you see yourself doing more sophisticated work, you can ask for more sophisticated work. So with that in mind, I set you free to go do your syntheses, and I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you learn more from synthesis than just summarizing a few articles or chapters. I look forward to your thinking this week.